Well, a lot of you complain that I make videos in the bathroom, although often using more derogatory terms in the bathroom. So I thought I'd oblige you all and make it as I drive. There's lovely West Virginia. Another part of our company needs a spare part, and so I am driving a couple hours to bring it to them. So I thought I'd make a video in the car, ill-advised as that may be. Almost looks like fall because the spring is just starting to turn green, but it's still mostly brown. Anyway, not my last video, but the one before that about Scandinavian socialism. That video was not meant to be a comprehensive argument against universal healthcare or government-run healthcare, or a rigorous attempt to justify free market provision of that good, although the argument for that good is the same for all the others, basically. Mostly the point of that video was to look at the single argument of just pointing to Scandinavia and saying healthcare will be better provided by the government because look at blank. Usually Sweden. Americans will also say, Norway, Denmark. I usually don't say Finland because that's kind of not in their consciousness as much as Sweden is. Maybe they'll say Canada. The point of the video is to say that point alone is hardly proof. In fact, it's not even convincing, and it's of such low quality that one can even ask whether it's even evidence at all, let alone proof. The topic of justifying free market healthcare or disproving government healthcare are way too big for a single video. But in the comments section of that video, someone made a comment which brought up another one of these points that is extraordinarily weak and yet is so common and is used as the foundation for a lot of people, not every single person, but a lot of people for their misbeliefs. Now, it wasn't pertaining specifically to healthcare, but what it was, I don't have it in front of me. I don't have internet in my car other than on my phone, and it's not wired into my laptop, although I guess there's ways to make that happen. Not that I'd be willing to pay for it, though. Basically, it said, what you're talking about, I agree with Ron Paul a lot of the way, but we've tried deregulation, and we know where that goes. And once again, I'm not going to make a comprehensive argument as to why the state doesn't need to regulate things, or why state regulation has been bad and counterproductive, even accepting their own terms. Oh, look at the sun, it's bright. Rather, I'm just going to, like in my socialism video on Finland, or Scandinavia, say, explain why just asserting that is so unconvincing and so pathetic when it comes to an attempt to argue your point. And it's wrong on so many levels that I probably will miss some of them. And I probably don't know all of them anyway, so we hear it all the time. It's the chorus of the left ever and always. No matter how much regulation they get, they always claim that whatever ills are in the world, surely they must be the result of deregulation. For the sake of argument, though, just assume that some meaningful, definitive type of deregulation occurred at some point preceding the financial crisis of 2008. I'm assuming that that's what the reference was. Again, it's hard to tell because people on the left will use this argument for basically everything bad that's ever happened, so one can, his comment was pretty non-specific. He could have been talking about the Great Depression, he could have been talking about the collapse of 2008, he could have been talking about, I don't know, the ghetto in the inner cities for all I know, or the race riots of the 1960s. He wasn't specified, but let's just say that there was some deregulation in some meaningful sense. Well, there's a correlation does not equal causation fallacy. Literally millions, billions, trillions of different events have taken place in the lead up in the year preceding 2008. There are hundreds or thousands that, if we were to list them, we could say, well, that could plausibly have an effect on, say, the housing bubble or financial collapse. So to just cite one of them and say, well, that happened, hence that's the cause. Obviously, the correlation is not necessarily equal causation fallacy. Is rearing its head yet again. Perhaps there was an El Nino that year. Maybe taxes were too high. Maybe even though there was deregulation, maybe it was the addition of some other regulation. Maybe it was some presidential policy here or there. Perhaps it was the wars. Maybe there's a subtle demographic change happening in the United States, which indeed there is, and this is having some kind of effect. I mean, we could go on and on and on. Maybe it was bird flu or SARS or the wars. I already mentioned that, but I guess that bears repeating. Perhaps it's economic growth in China or the outstanding debt or any number. We can go down the line. Maybe it's the likelihood of electing a semi-black president. Who knows? And to just say something happened, hence that's the cause, is not good enough. You have to show why exactly this happened. Now, I posted a response to him bringing up another point, which is, in no meaningful sense could there said to have been any kind of deregulation. This is a problem with the term. It seems like it should be fairly easy to understand what that means, deregulation. There has to be some kind of reduction in the number of regulations, but on net, the number of regulations grows every year. There's only really one type of true deregulation that the government ever goes through historically, and that is after a war. During a war, the government increases regulations enormously. This was especially true during World War II and World War I, especially World War II, though. And typically, right after the war, much of the regulation that was instituted during the war, not all of it, unfortunately, but much of it is repealed. And you could say that, yes, that's deregulation. So 1946 and 1947, yeah, there was a lot of deregulation then. 1919, 1920, a lot of deregulation then. Civil War didn't see nearly as much regulation. There was a little bit, though. So yeah, that was deregulatory. In any other year, it's basically a myth. The net number of federal laws, and not to mention state and local laws, increases every year, usually on the order of magnitude of several thousand pages. That's the federal registry. I'm not even talking about the local ones. The last time there was a president in peacetime who did any kind of substantive cutbacks was not Reagan, not Bush, either of them, not Clinton, but Carter. Carter deregulated a number of industries. I don't hear anybody bitching that they stopped the AT&T monopoly or the airline monopoly. I don't see how we're the worse off for, not having monopolies in those areas any longer, but he did do that. On net, he wasn't a deregulator. On net, he increased regulations, but if you're going to pick a president who cut any regulations, it would be Carter. But if you have a president or a Congress or a governmental period where the number of regulations increases by hundreds and hundreds or thousands of new regulations, and yet maybe here or there one or two regulations were repealed, it is very difficult how anybody could reasonably claim to characterize that as deregulation. That is definitely an increase in regulation, and on the periphery, maybe one or two regulations were cut back. So this whole, how they're coming to conclude that there was deregulation is not clear, and I've yet to hear liberals blame the actual deregulatory periods with anything at all. I mean, I don't hear anybody, even the Paul Krugmans of the world, saying, oh man, all that deregulation in 1946 and 47, that really caused the Great Depression of the late 1940s. Oh yeah, that's right. 1946 and 1947 were probably the single greatest years in economic growth in U.S./world history. But so there's nothing really to bitch about there. So it's unclear what the meaningful basis for claiming that 2008, 2007, the Bush years, or anything for that matter, constituted deregulation, or what even would constitute deregulation. How many bills do they have to add? How many regulations do they have to add before we have to conclude, okay, we're not in a deregulatory environment? Now, I'd say that the most honest answer you could come by would be that on net, if there's more regulations than there were previously, then you can't possibly have deregulation. The other problem here is, okay, fair enough. Let's just assume that it wasn't really deregulation on net, but these particular regulations, this or that one, maybe the few that were changed or eliminated, that's the cause. Again, correlation causation fallacy. If the government institutes 1,000 new regulations, cuts one regulation, you're going to need more than just say, well, they cut one, that's the cause. We could very easily argue there's 1,000 times more likely that it was one of the ones that they added than the one that they cut, just going off of sheer probability without analyzing it at all. Now, the one that they like to cite, if they know anything, which a lot of them don't, will say, well, look at Glass-Steagall. They repealed Glass-Steagall. Well, this is not true. They changed Glass-Steagall. They took one regulation and they changed it slightly, and it's unclear how changing a regulation causes deregulation or can be called deregulation. Second problem is Glass-Steagall itself doesn't seem to line up. It's not clear how that would cause a housing bubble, how that would create all this capital for malinvestment. It doesn't really tell us much about why banks would be willing to give out bad loans to people who can never pay back. The timing doesn't quite fit. The other main problem I would see with it is, look, Glass-Steagall hasn't existed forever. It was instituted, I believe, in 1934. And if the repeal of Glass-Steagall is the cause of the housing boom in 2008, why weren't there similar booms every year or periodically all the time prior to its passage? There weren't. And so its claim to be the culprit is dubious at best. So, and again, the timing isn't quite right. Like, but the boom was clearly in evidence and actually being predicted by none other than Ron Paul, among others, well before the repeal ever took place. So if that's the cause, how come people who were able to predict it, I mean, everybody who predicted it, whether it be Peter Schiff or any number of other economists, none of them think that it was Glass-Steagall that caused it. So the people who didn't predict it, then they didn't predict it, they do post-dictions. Something happened. They're kind of like Nostradamus. This is how the left-wing people are. They're like Nostradamus. They don't actually predict anything. They have a whole bunch of cryptic, nonsensical bullshit that they think is scientific. You know, like Keynes, basically, or Marx. And when something happens, they post-dict and say, oh, this was predicted by, it's just like Nostradamus. You know, the Nostradamus people never come out and say, tomorrow the president's going to get assassinated. And we know because of Quatrain number 4, verse 8. No, what happens is the president gets assassinated, and then the Nostradamus profiteers come out and say, oh, Nostradamus predicted that. Oh, really? How come you didn't know until after it happened? Likewise, if you realize that deregulation is going to cause these problems, how come you didn't predict the day that it happened? Oh, well, we're going to have a crisis. No, the only people who predicted were the Ron Pauls, the Austrians, and a few others, and they didn't pick. So this deregulatory bugaboo argument is absurdly weak, to the point of we can wonder whether it should even count as evidence at all, let alone convincing evidence. I certainly don't, and I'm tired of hearing it, and I'm tired of every time I ask this, I ask follow-up questions, and I never get good answers. It's just a religious mantra to these people. And I understand that it's almost pointless to argue, because if you're not committed to like understanding truth and being willing to admit that maybe you're wrong, which, you know, maybe I am wrong, but, you know, I didn't get to where I am by just accepting some kind of dogma, because I wasn't always what I am now. I've changed quite a bit over the years. And, you know, there are areas where I don't know, and I'll say, you know, I'm not sure. Or I don't have a good... People ask me all the time. People are asking me about my predictions for the future. I'm like, I don't know what the future is going to happen in 40 years. Are you kidding? There'd be nothing more... There'd be no higher folly than to go around for me to say I know what's going to happen in 40 years. But a lot of people, they just... government makes them feel warm and fuzzy and happy. And so anything that they hear that justifies it, that justifies the utopia they want to imagine, then that's evidence, even if the justifications are piss poor, as is the case here. So anyway, my computer's about to slip off my table, off my seat. I hope that the audio comes across okay on this. I'm getting a little hoarse, and I don't want to crash into this back of the semi. Oh, by the way, this highway was built by William Byrd, the Ku Klux Klan member of the Democratic Party who was in the Senate he was like 94 or 5. He just died 2 years ago. Anyway, he was like the king of pork, basically. So thanks be to him for this lovely highway. Anyway, that's it. Talk to y'all later. If I can turn the camera off, this is going to be awkward.